Well, now, while Conservative MPs rallied round George Osborne, the Chancellor, after this week's autumn statement, the same cannot be said for Labour and Ed Balls. A Labour source told Sky News the party had a strong economic argument to make, but it was not well made by the Shadow Chancellor. Another used a four-letter word to describe the performance. So has the man who once imagined himself as a future leader of the party now become a liability? Well, I'm glad to say we are now joined by the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls. Very good to see you smiling through that introduction, Mr. Balls. But let me read you that quotation in full.
Who is it from, the quote?
You know the way it works. It's an unnamed Labour source, but it is well sourced from Sophie Ridge, our political correspondent. Got it. Labour has a very strong economic argument to make, quote unquote. Unfortunately, it was not made well in the chamber today. Would you go along with that assessment?
Look, it's a really strong economic argument, and that was why 300 Tory MPs were going to shout really loudly from the very beginning. In a split second, you've got a decision. Do you decide to ask the Speaker for help, try and go quiet, or do you think, I'm not going to be shouted down by Tory MPs who are so out of touch, they don't know about a cost of living crisis, and I decided to take the argument back to them and not be deflected and say, no, there is not a recovery for most working people. Living standards are falling. What happened the next day from the Institute of Fiscal Studies? They said that they effectively confirmed the Chancellor is out of touch, thinking living standards are going up, because for most people they're going down. So
yeah, no, you're right
I think we're winning the argument.
We'll concede that, the IFS and all kinds of things about the extra borrowing, your analysis there, but it's not just about the analysis, as you well know. Have you watched any of this performance back? Because this is how you kicked off. We're just going to show it now.
The Chancellor is in complete denial about the central fact which is defining this government in office. Under this Chancellor, under this Prime Minister, under this Chancellor and this Prime Minister, for most people in our country, living standards aren't rising, Mr. Speaker, they are falling year on year on year.
Must be said your leader didn't look over-impressed. I mean, did Ed Miliband say afterwards, well done?
He did, and he said to me a number of times, keep going. But look, my question is, what was George Osborne laughing at? I'm there saying living standards are falling for millions of people. George Osborne and David Cameron, the two people that Nadine Dorries said were two posh boys who don't know the price of milk, thought that was funny. I don't think it was funny. I've had more people in the last 48 hours coming up to me and saying, keep up the fight, because we need a Labour government, because we're getting worse off. And these people, these Conservatives, don't understand our lives.
I think what it was, I mean, you know about the parliamentary tactics and the kind of bullying that goes on there, but you use that phrase in denial. And that was instantly thrown back at you because the charge is, and it comes from some on your own side, that you're still in denial about the past. You can't move on economically until you accept that the Labour Party made mistakes in the past, that you're the ones in denial.
The interesting thing was when the opinion polls came out the next day and they were asked the question, who was right on the arguments and who was in denial, and far more people said George Osborne was in denial about the cost of living crisis rather than believing his idea the economy is getting better, when for most people it's not. I've been saying to you for 3 years that they were going to not succeed on
for 3 years we should stimulate the economy. Do you still think that?
Right. Absolutely.
Does it need it now?
If we'd done that in the last 3 years, we'd had more growth and the deficit would have come down.
But this is the point, Shadow Chancellor. What is the message now? Does it need that stimulus now, or is that all gone?
No, look, personally, I think stimulating the economy, as George Osborne is doing, by boosting housing demand through Help to Buy, without building the homes to make them affordable, is a big mistake. I would step in now, raise the bank levy, and have help for families struggling with childcare, an energy price freeze, endow the Business Investment Bank, build the homes we need. We have got policy which actually addresses the cost of living crisis and the long-term growth crisis in our economy. George Osborne on Thursday had nothing to say other than him trying to say, my policy is working, and most people in the country are saying, no, it is not, Chancellor.
But it's almost as if you've come here to rectify what you didn't say, or what you didn't get to say, what you didn't get to say in the House of Commons. And this is a crucial point. It's coming from your own side, and you well know. This is from John Mann on the Treasury Select Committee, quote unquote. We should be saying, Labour, we should be saying that George Osborne is repeating the mistakes of the past. You've just made that point. But the crucial bit is this. We were wrong in allowing credit to build up, and we should say so. They're repeating your mistakes. Do you accept that, Shadow Chancellor?
I've been on with your programme many times and said we didn't regulate the banks in a tough enough way, and therefore there were big failures in the world in banking.
That's it.
But we were responsible for that. At the time, the Independent Bank of England didn't take the view in 2005, 6 and 7 they needed to raise interest rates because they weren't worrying about a personal credit boom. What actually happened was that there was, I think by 2007, there were parts, particularly in London, of the housing market which were going out of control. Generally in our economy, inflation was still low. There was then a global financial crisis which then had a massive impact here into Britain. I put my hands up and taken responsibility for that, as we all need to do.
But on the credit side of things, I mean, the truth is, Mr. Balls, isn't it, that you're secretly proud of the record. You think there's nothing you should apologise about. The things that you and Gordon Brown and others achieved.
I just did apologise.
No, you apologised about failing to regulate the banks.
Very important.
What about the consumer boom?
Well, look, we made the Bank of England independent. One of the best decisions we made.
Well, the
Bank of England were in charge of whether or not to slow down that boom.
The indebtedness of the nation, the personal indebtedness, all on Labour's watch. Was that a mistake? Well, with hindsight.
On national debt and public debt, we got it down to a very low level. On personal debt did go up, that is true. And at that time, I remember a speech by the Governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, in 2006. His view at the time was that this wasn't a personal debt-driven boom. This was a reflection of a low inflation, low interest rate economy. And I think at the moment, many people,
so you're proud of that record? Why don't you say it?
No. What I'm saying to you is, in 2006, both Labour and Conservatives supported the Governor's judgment that at that time that was sustainable. We actually don't know whether or not that would have led to a big unsustainable housing boom, because that was nipped in the bud by the global financial crisis. And look, in the balance of these things, do I think the thing which pushed Britain into recession was mistakes in British economic policy alone, or was it the result of what happened in America, where there was definitely a subprime bubble, which then went round the world?
What you were saying effectively is we were going along the right track, and these unforeseen circumstances came from across the Atlantic and blew us off course. Well, the fact is that the nation was not prepared as it should be to deal with unexpected financial and economic shocks.
I didn't say that, because I said that the big thing was what happened in the banking industry, and that was catastrophic for the world. But what I do think is that, look, every government gets some things right and doesn't do everything right. We were completely right, in my view, to make the bank independent, to have a national minimum wage, not to join the single currency, to get our national debt down, to invest in the National Health Service. We did many good things. We should have been tougher on the banks. Should there have been a decision in 2006 to raise interest rates by the Bank of England? I don't know the answer to that, because I think we don't know the extent to which there was an unsustainable housing boom taking off at that point, because the global financial crisis knocked that all on the head. You seem to have left out,
and government spending was at the right levels in your book. You think you were spending the right amounts of money?
Look, we've discussed this before. We had a very small deficit on the current account. We had national debt which was low and stable, lower than America, France, Germany and Japan.
So it's not an apology here, is it? You're not moving
I'm not going to apologise that the Labour government spent too much on the National Health Service. Do I think that we didn't spend every pound of money wisely in that period? Of course not. If we had known, though, see, this is the point. When the deficit went up so much, if we had known in advance that was going to happen, would we have decided to raise taxes or cut spending? No. We would have decided to intervene in the banking world to stop that financial crisis happening in the first place. That is why I go back to that as the big mistake of that period.
You've laid that out very clearly. I want to get back to your performance in the House of Commons. We've got one other little clip I just want to run here. We can talk over it as we see. You'll know the... you say you've watched it back, right?
I've not watched it back.
Oh, you haven't watched it back? We'll have a look at this then.
I've been far too busy doing my job.
Mr. Millerman. Look at the top left. It's Chris Evans, isn't he PPS to Chris Leslie, so part of the Treasury team.
Cuts to child benefit mean that on average, families with children are worse off because of his budgets. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker.
Would you accept that you didn't exactly put a spring in the step of the Labour side?
It looked to me like Mr. Evans had been in a nightclub to 3 in the morning, maybe doing a bit too much karaoke, and was trying to stay awake. It didn't look like the idea that he was
upset... Well, has the feedback been positive? I mean, you know, let's leave...
Should I be totally honest with you? Yeah. What we've been doing for the last 48 hours is been out in the country arguing the case on cost of living, small business Saturday...
But Charlie, I have to bring you back to that. I mean, yes, indeed, some very good points, but people make judgments on things they see on the television. You're the shadow chancellor. You're the man that wants to be chancellor. You're the man that wants to lead this economy to the sunlit uplands. And there you were. You seemed unsure of yourself. You were bellowing. You lost track of everything.
Were you in the House of Commons chamber at the time?
I was watching it live from start to finish, as were a lot of the nation.
And as I said to you, I've had more people in the last 48 hours than at any time since I've been shadow chancellor coming up to me on the train in the town centre saying, keep up the fight against this out-of-touch government who are making our lives harder.
And did they
not
say,
acting.
well done, Shadow Chancellor?
I'm afraid, Dermot, tragic as it may be to tell you this, but most people don't spend their time watching the House of Commons chamber. They're not watching that live, as I haven't done since. There's a Westminster bubble, and of course there's always going to be debates and kind of, you know, who did well, who did badly, all that kind of stuff. Out there in the country, they're not talking about the House of Commons chamber. They're talking about who's right and who's wrong on the big issues for our economy, living standards in the future. And the fact is, they think David Cameron and George Osborne are totally out of touch and doing nothing.
So the Westminster
energy prices,
bubble, but
childcare.
you and your family are part of it. What did Yvette say about it? What did she say? Did she say, well done, Ed?
Yeah, she did, actually. She did.
She watched it. Obviously, she was there.
Yeah.
She said, well done.
She did, yeah. Actually, so did Ed Miliband and Harriet Harman and everybody else. Because when you're in there, look, I've got George Osborne and David Cameron wanting me to retreat on the big argument, which is who's right and who's wrong on the cost of living. And the one thing that nobody seeing these pictures here thought was I retreated an inch on the fact that we're in touch with the nation and their concerns, and we've got the policies to answer that on the energy price freeze, on childcare, on the 10p tax. And David Cameron and George Osborne, the guys who cut income tax for people over £150,000 and won't freeze energy bills, they're totally out of touch with our country. There may be some people who are cheering this recovery of Dermot, but most people aren't.
OK, I mean, the fact is on that performance, though, you know, a lot of people would have felt some sympathy for you, you know, because you were facing a wall of sound, as you described, from the other side, struggling to shout over it. And I know with a bit of a cold and the rest of it.
I didn't actually, to be honest, I'm not sure what these cold things are. I think there's more that if you shout for 15 minutes, your voice goes hoarse.
But, well, indeed. But, you know, the fact is that people then say, well, you know, we don't give that kind of sympathy to the Shadow Chancellor because, you know, he can dish it out and he's got to be able to take it himself. I want to show you one more.
I'm not complaining, but the thing is, I'm not complaining. No, you're not. I'm not complaining at all.
Exactly.
What I want to talk about is what is happening in our country and what the policies are to make our economy strong for the future and the cost of living crisis.
People are talking about you remaining in the job. You must have seen the betting on the website saying, you know, odds on Ed Balls being the Chancellor. Who's going to replace him?
Look, the Daily Mail, who have been writing these articles...
It's not the Daily Mail, it's the bookmakers.
No, the Daily Mail would love me and Ed Miliband out because they want to keep in an out-of-touch Tory government who's cutting tax at the top.
People are betting on you not being in the job.
Well, of course, but I mean, that's the nature of politics. Of course,
these people want to make money.
They're betting on David Cameron, they're betting on George Osborne, Ed Miliband. It's just the way it is. The thing is, the reason why you ask me these questions is because you want me to be bothered. Frankly, Dem, I couldn't give a toss.
I just want you to be honest. I just want you to be honest.
I'm being totally honest with you. I mean, what I'm worried about is in my constituency, people are in real trouble.
You go around.
Real trouble.
You're very in touch with the Labour constituencies. Yeah. We know you're very in touch with what goes on in the House of Commons. Yeah. I mean, the fact is that, you know, we'd be a bit shocked if you haven't heard someone saying, perhaps not to your face, but some of your lieutenants reporting back to you, there is muttering about the Shadow Chancellor. There are those that saying we should replace him with Alistair Darling, perhaps bring back Alan Johnson. You must have heard that.
Look, people have been saying that for 3 years since the first day I did this job. And the nature of politics is you either spend your time in the bubble, obsessed, reading the diary columns, worried about the Daily Mail, or you think, actually, you know, in the real world, let's go and talk to people about what's happening in their lives. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never been less bothered about the gossiping, the tittle-tattle. It doesn't matter at all. In the end, if the country don't want a Labour government, if the country think George Osborne is on their side, then I've got a problem. Until then,
OK, one more clip we've got from this, and this is about the dishing it out and being able to take it element of it all. This was as George Osborne was responding.
Because he wants more jobs taxes, and he can't ask about banking and financial services because the person they hired to advise them was the Reverend Flowers. The right honourable gentleman.
We know what you're saying there, don't we? You can be honest with us. The implication is, and you've been asking the Prime Minister and the Shadow Chancellor about that, is about Class A drugs, because that's the allegation about the Reverend Flowers. That's what you're doing there, isn't it, when you're pointing like that?
No, actually, no, the opposite. What happened was Reverend Flowers was the chair of that bank for 3 weeks under a Labour government and 3 years under a Conservative government in which George Osborne and his ministers were actively championing Reverend Flowers to take over 600 Lloyds branches and own them. And this review, which the Prime Minister has announced, when he announced that a couple of weeks ago, I thought George Osborne went completely white in the House of Commons, because George Osborne is thinking, hang on a sec, we've got far more questions to ask about the regulation of the co-op bank than us. As for drugs, look, David Cameron is the one who decided 10 days ago to have a big discussion about drugs, and he tried to suggest that Ed Miliband and I had been out on the town with Reverend Flowers, and I just pointed out to him, no, I never have.
OK, no, you never have, and asked, and the implication being, well, have you?
I've no idea.
No, not you. You were asking them, the other side. You were asking
I've no
David,
idea.
but you want to know, don't you? You've asked them.
I think it's unwise for the Prime Minister to get into a debate about those issues. I think it's unedifying, not necessary, and we should get onto the real issue.
No,
what I care about is why the Co-op Bank was being supported by George Osborne to buy all those branches with a bank chair who he should have been doing proper due diligence on. I don't think that the regulator or the Treasury were doing their jobs, and I think George Osborne will find this inquiry very, very uncomfortable.
I mean, you also criticise, I mean, the substantive stuff in that debate was, you said, no proper plan, Mr Osborne, you have no proper plan to earn our way to rising living standards.
Exactly.
To earn our way to rising living standards. Right. Do you have one?
I think that's right, and I think the problem with the OBR forecast was, what did it say? It said business investment has fallen this year by over 5%. And
businesses
it's very weak.
invest, not governments.
Yeah, and the issue is, why aren't British businesses investing in this economy now? Why is our export performance so weak? What we're saying is, let's have a business investment bank to back businesses who want to expand. Where's the plan to support small businesses struggling? We're saying, don't do the large company tax rate cut, freeze business rates for the smallest companies, things which will help people to invest, get young people back to work by repeating the bank bonus tax and having a job guarantee. They're real policies which will make this economy built to last and give us a recovery which is strong for the long term. There was nothing about that from George Osborne in his statement. It was vacuous on economic policy.
OK, last question about MPs' pay. 11% rise coming in after the next election. Perhaps, if it does, would you take it? Would the Labour front bench tell all Labour MPs not to take it?
We're going to get this report on Thursday, so we'll see what they say. As far as I can see, they have done this report entirely out of any context of the real world. How can they possibly be saying we should discuss pay comparability when everybody else is seeing their pay frozen or falling? I think it's preposterous we should be having this discussion, and I can't, as a shadow chancellor, how could I possibly say to Labour MPs at this time, with the economy like this, when people are under real pressure, there's a cost of living crisis, I mean, that they should take a pay rise? It's about as ridiculous as the chancellor saying people over £150,000, I'll cut your taxes. Both would make people look completely out of touch. They're out of touch. We're not going to make the same mistake. So I think it's a ridiculous recommendation.
Well, Shadow Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for coming in to make your case, and best of luck with the piano practice. I believe you've got a bit of it.
In half an hour.
Piano concert in half an hour. Well, there we are, taking time.
Far more stressful than the House of Commons, I'll tell you. My gosh.
Well, good luck with that, Mr. Balls. Ed Balls there.